News. Get the whole story.
Very good morning to you wherever you're watching us from. This is Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado. Today on the show we shall be taking a look at the week and the top headlines that have been making it to the front row of our news coverage. And of course we'll be taking a look at today's headlines with Michael Gitonga, who's joining us from home via Zoom, and he's going to peruse through the papers and give you a snippet of what's making headlines. But aside from that, we do encourage you to be a part of the conversations that we have here on studio, whereby we'll be talking about the top headlines, and also later on we'll have celebrity chat with Adele Onyango joining us, as well as hot topics being brought to you by Brian Eseli. But on Twitter you can answer these questions and let us know your opinion. Do you think the lockdown in Isili and Old Town will help curb the spread of coronavirus? Do you think the lockdown in Isili and Old Town, that's in Mombasa, will help curb the spread of coronavirus? Get on Twitter, and I'm at Trix Ingado. Michael is at Michael G. Gitonga. The official hashtag is KTN Morning Express, and express your views. We'll be sampling them as the show goes along. But for now, let's kick things off with Press Review with Michael. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Trix. And yes, thank you for joining us this morning on Morning Express. And of course, taking advantage of the technology that we have now, working from home and ensuring that we limit movement and keep things going that way. So we'll go straight into the dailies, and maybe just to start differently, we normally start with the headlines, but based on the question that we have this morning as to whether you think the lockdown in Isli and Old Town is really going to limit the COVID-19 spread, there's actually an article on, I believe this is page 7 of the Standard. 5 positive cases and relatives flee Old Town. Now, this was just as the announcement was made, and this particular article in the Standard is highlighting a family or a number of people that had gone for testing, and this was in Old Town, Mombasa, just before the announcement was made that the place was going to be locked down. So they went in for the test, they did their test, they turned out to be positive. However, they flee and took off before the results were announced, and nobody knows where these people might be. So of course that becomes a matter of concern. And this is mainly because, as you would imagine, they had expected that they were going to be in Old Town and they were not going to be quarantined, and they maybe expected that they were going to be negative. But on the announcement of the lockdown, obviously, and Old Town Mombasa, then they took off. And that's a story that's worrying now. Mombasa Old Town went into lockdown on Wednesday. 5 people who tested positive for COVID-19 slipped with their families and vanished. So again, let us know whether you think that lockdown is really going to limit the number of cases that we see continuing. But now on to the headlines of the Daily Standard, and that's a Standard where we have another rather interesting twist of events. And the headline is Raila Men Shock Attack on Jubilee. Now, many of us will remember and identify that from the 9th of March, I believe it was, 2 years ago, we had what we now refer to as the handshake between Raila Amolo Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. We do know that for the longest time ever, NASA or ODM party was what we'd call a very vibrant and active opposition. And from the time of the handshake, that seemed to have taken a turn until now. So could this be the first time that we have Jubilee and ODM specifically falling out? And I'll just read some of the statements made by Orange Democratic Movement leaders. And it's literally a scathing attack on the Jubilee Party. We have one from Orengo who says, Kibaki built many things, even in Budalangi. As soon as Jubilee came in, even the bridge the president was to launch collapsed. Failure is the face of Jubilee. They must wake up. We have John Badi who also says, for how long will the government of Kenya take Kenya for a ride? For how long are we going to wait for the government to behave normally? So remember, for the longest time ever, people have been saying that, or feeling that the Orange Democratic Movement has somehow become part of government. So for the first time, they are disowning government for the first time since the handshake. For the first time, we see them literally standing on the other side. We have also Junaid Mohammed, who says this government cannot even feed its people. All they care about is tea and mandazi, and he must be referring to the recently released budget. Remember, there was a 4 million amount there set for tea and snacks. So all they care about is tea and mandazi. When people are suffering, it is shame, shame. We must bring this government to account. So questions, of course, arising as to what might be happening there. And this, by the way, is just as ODM leader Raila Odinga apparently had lunch with Oscar Sudi. Now, many of us do know that Oscar Sudi is a very close ally to the deputy president, and for the longest time ever, we have had the deputy president and Orange Democratic Movement leader Raila Odinga not seeing eye to eye. So one wonders what might be happening right there. So that's, story continues on page 2 of the Standard, where ODM's leader's fury raises queries as to what might be going in, and harsh remarks as Parliament occurred. Now, that is one of the stories that you'd like to get and catch up with right there. Now, many Kenyans will also be this will be of interest to you, as there's a story on page, I believe this is page 3 of the Standard, and IMF approved 79 billion loan amid calls for prudent expenditure. So 79 billion, this is a loan that has been approved by the IMF. And this is mainly to cater and take care of the COVID-19 disaster and economic downturn that we are experiencing already. And according to IMF, they say that indeed it is already worrying the state of the economy that Kenya was in. But this 79 billion has come in to boost and ensure that we cushion, or the country cushions Kenya from that, negative economic downturn. However, they do state that this money needs to be well spent. So the lender insists on independent post-crisis auditing of COVID-19 related expenditure and results to be published. So they're insisting that after COVID-19, post-COVID-19, there needs to be an independent, audit of the money of the 79 billion that has been approved, and to ensure this is also done effectively, that it should also be published. And the number of cases male cases we're dealing with right now of COVID-19, it gives those figures. We have 358, female 249. So that might be an interesting read for you should you want to, find out what that money is all about, where it's coming from, and what IMF has to say in regards to that. All right, other stories I've already highlighted on page 6, 5 positive cases and relatives flee the old town. And this is, of course, after they had had tested positive. But after the announcement of the lockdown, they disappeared, possibly to leave town, and one wonders where they might be. And of course, if they were all positive, which the results dictate that they were positive, then that means they're probably, infecting others. On to page 8 of the Standard, confusion over border rocks Eastleigh as lockdown starts. And you can imagine, Eastleigh is always a hub of activity, literally a beehive of activity with all sorts of trading going on in Eastleigh. So come Wednesday, and there was the announcement that Old Town and Eastleigh were locked down. Literally, you cannot go in or come out from 7 p.m. Wednesday. And this, of course, was to limit the number of cases being spread, given that there was community transmission that was very high in those areas. So some residents claim that they were not allowed to move within the estate, yet they were not part of there was not part of the order given earlier on, so they needed to get home. So of course, confusion wrecking the place, with some trying to leave, and you can imagine also those who possibly may not have made any arrangements to leave Eastleigh or Old Town. But this particular article is highlighting Eastleigh. Then there, of course, would be concerns as to how they're going to get out. But that's a story that you might want to read. 7 killed, over 57,000 displaced as flood rage on. And that is, of course, another disaster that we are experiencing in Kenya, and that is to do with the floods, and 7 killed and over 57,000 displaced as floods rage on. And that would now kind of lead me to looking at the Nation, the Daily Nation, because it has some articles that literally allude to that particular, scenario. And the headlines for the Daily Nation is Members of Parliament united in anger. Again, this is the scenario that, of course, is unique, given that we always have MPs, particularly from the political divide, not seeing eye to eye, not agreeing. But in this case, and this is in regards to floods, they seem to be reading from the same script. And according to this article, floods, politicians demand proper response to floods. Emergency, which has claimed 194 as we speak, left thousands of families destitute. So, of course, as we deal with COVID-19, then another disaster that has hit the country is that to do with floods. COVID-19 House challenge to demand accountability for the government on the use of coronavirus response funds, and also city politics. Senators take issue with takeover of Nairobi County by national government and the recent evictions. Of course, that has been another curious, thing that's happening, and one wonders. COVID-19, we have floods, then we have government evicting some people from certain areas. So, of course, that is a matter of concern. And some of those who have weighed in this particular debate, we have the likes of James Orengo from the Orange Democratic Movement, we have Junet Mohammed from ODM, Susan Kihika, who's a Jubilee member, and Kipchumba Murkomen, who's also a Jubilee member. What they have said regarding that is something that is in your dailies. On page 3 of the Daily Nation this morning, we also have a story there, an article that would be of interest to you. And this is, of course, because it has to do with your pocket. Economy is hit hard as jobs are lost and entire sectors take a nosedive. This, of course, is unprecedented, given that there was no expectation that COVID-19 would take us the way it has. And what makes it even a little bit more difficult and challenging, both for government and economists, is the fact that nobody knows what the exit strategy is, because we don't have a time frame, we don't know how long this is going to go. But this particular article, of course, highlighting and giving you details as to what is the economy right now, how it is expected, and maybe some of the strategies that would be given. We have the Treasury CS Kuriatani, the Ministry Projects, giving us an update of what that is all about. No end in sight as Kenya battles virus. This is the story on page 4 of the Nation, and there's an interesting picture there of people queuing, and of course, as they're queuing, they're not maintaining the social distancing that is required, that is recommended, and that, of course, leaves many questions unanswered, wondering how then are we going to flatten the curve if we're not going to keep the bare minimum requirements. But again, there are those challenges that we know that come with certain areas, particularly the high density areas, the slum areas, even the buildings themselves do not take into account any social distancing. Lockdown turns Eastleigh into a ghost town, which I'm sure is a strange occurrence. That is not anything that would have been expected. That's a story that's been carried on the Nation as well. Certificate rule catches drivers off guard. Now, you do know that the announcement that was made, I believe it was on Thursday, requires drivers that are going to be driving trucks to have a COVID-19 certificate. And one of the places that they will not be able to access without that particular certificate is the Kenya Ports Authority, the ports. And we do know that many of them make a living by transporting things from there. So some of them have been caught off guard, which would definitely render them almost jobless immediately until they get that certificate. Failure to get that certificate, that means that they may not be able to do their normal job of driving. So that's a story that's on page 6 of the Nation. Seek medical help, don't die alone at home, Ministry of Health says. Another trend that, of course, has been realized and noticed is the fact that people may not want to come out and declare that they're symptomatic or they have the symptoms for COVID-19, and this is because of fear of, 1, stigmatization, and 2, being locked down in government or facilities which they're not sure how they are. So the health ministry coming out there to say, please do not die alone. There's a lot more in your Nation and Standard. Remember, today being Friday, we also have the Pulse magazine, which is in the Standard. So do get yourself a copy of the Standard, and I'm sure the Hot Topics team is going to be handling some of those topics right there. So that's where we wind up the newspaper review, and Trix, maybe a quick reminder of that question that we have this morning as we take a break or as we continue.
Right, so we are asking you to get on Twitter and tell us whether you think it is going to, the lockdown in Italy and Old Town is going to help curb the spread of coronavirus. Do you think the closure or lockdown of Italy and Old Town will help curb the spread of coronavirus? Get on Twitter. I'm at Trix